Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. We start off on a much more serious tone than a lot of weeks in Missouri politics with State Senator Andrew Koenig. Senator, your bill was on the floor, Wayfair, which we'll talk about in a moment, when the Senate adjourned, went into a caucus meeting and came out, and later it was found out in that meeting you decided that the State Senate was going to take off this coming week and you were one of the first people to do this. I mean, it was interesting. The Senate kind of in your caucus decided they weren't going to have session next week. Then you saw the NBA, the NHL, Major League Baseball. Tell us about the discussion that went on in that caucus when your bill had to get laid over so you could go have this decision that was 6 hours ahead of the rest of the country.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a precaution. I think everybody's siding on the side of precaution. Now, I certainly prefer to work because there's a lot of bills out there that need to get done. And so my preference would to go back to work next week. But it's definitely a precaution, and I guess a lot of people believe it's better side on precaution.
So Caitlin Shallhorn, the editor of the Missouri Times, broke the story that Wednesday night, and I think some people looked around and were like, this seems a little much. But throughout Wednesday night and certainly into Thursday, you saw the SEC, the Ivy League, March Madness, an American institution, all those things started to cancel. I guess there is, I mean, people that don't come to the Capitol a lot don't realize in April, if you're a fourth grader in Missouri, now I think I'm so old now, this must have started after me, but fourth graders in Missouri learn Missouri history. And a lot of school groups come to the Capitol, and I just think it's one of those things. Can you imagine if somebody did pass and get this virus and become sick? I guess that was
I think it shows, like, if you're looking across the country, I think these type of measures actually have shown to work.
Yeah.
So I think that's why the steps were taken.
Well, here in St. Louis with the Spanish flu, right, there's a history of St. Louis being a little ahead on quarantining, and there was history judged St. Louis's performance very well in that. Mm-hmm. So, but let me ask you this last question on this. There's about 6 weeks of session left. You're going to be off next week, then your regularly scheduled spring break. Do you think the session, there is going to be 6 weeks, or will there be 4 weeks, or is it just who knows in the day we live in?
I mean, we haven't made any decisions. I don't know what's going to happen, if they're going to restrict visitors to the Capitol. I mean, we have to get the budget done. That's something constitutionally we have to get done. So we certainly, and I would hope that we can work on our other legislation also.
Let's talk about something that you did work on that I think you've won praise. It's hard when you're in the top competitive Senate race for the Republicans and the Democrats right here in St. Louis County, but you've won praise from Republicans and Democrats for your work on this rape kit testing. Mm-hmm. Your predecessor Eric Schmidt, who's now the Attorney General, has made this a priority. It's something that you've picked up. Explain to folks the magnitude of the problem and what your bill will do to address it.
Sure. So we have a huge problem. We have nearly 6,000 kits that have not been tested, which that means victims are not getting justice. Yeah. And so what my bill does is it allows, first of all, it streamlines the process. It makes it so that way each victim can track their kit through the system. I mean, nothing would be worse than going through being a victim and then not knowing if your kit had even been tested. And so this will streamline the process. It also sets up a central repository to store these kits.
It seems like also if you knew that if you had someone in your life that had filed a complaint and were raped, and they knew that this kit wasn't tested, it might deter you from even going forward and filing a complaint simply because you thought, well, nothing's going to come of it.
That's right. And then because it would completely deter people from actually going through the process, because it's a hard process to go through.
Sure.
And a terrible situation. And if we don't do that, that means we have other rapists on the loose because they'll go out and do it again.
So there's a bill you've worked on talking about domestic violence shelters, a way to help. And I know I personally in Poplar Bluff, Marianne Allen has ran a place called the Haven House, and that a lot of people in the community rally behind, and is one of the most respected institutions in our community. Talk about what your bill would do to help bolster institutions like that, to help people who, everybody needs a hand, and in that situation, my gosh, your heart goes out to people that are suffering like that.
Sure. So when a potential victim needs a place to go to flee, we need to make sure that there's a place for them to go to. Otherwise, they might stay in that situation and become a victim again. And so what my bill does is we have a $2 million cap on domestic violence shelters, the tax credit. Mm-hmm. And so by removing that cap, we'll make sure that we have adequate funding through donations to these shelters.
It's interesting. You're known as a conservative's conservative. I mean, I would say you take it as a compliment being one of the most conservative senators in the body. However, of the things government can do and should do, you talk about roads and schools. Right. To me, these shelters and having a place for someone to go in their ultimate time of need like that, the most vulnerable situation you can have, that does seem like a role government should fill.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I don't know that list you would say is very long, but
Right.
how did you come to be interested in that piece of legislation and to help folks that are in that spot?
Well, I mean, as honestly looking at the Safe Kits bill, I realized
I thought they might be tied, yeah.
I looked in and I said, we have 6,000 kits, and then also I was like, we need to have preventative measures to make sure that potential victims have a place to go, so that way they don't get victimized. And so I thought this, removing this cap would not cost the state very much money at all, yet it would provide funding to some of these shelters.
Let's talk about the bill that was on the floor when the coronavirus response really started in Missouri from the legislature. Obviously, you had this bill, and this is the thing, I've never understood this. I'm a local guy myself. I'm a local business owner. You have Carrie's Hallmark right in downtown Jeff City that we all walk by, 3 or 4 times a week. You can go online and order a Hallmark card, and you don't have to pay sales tax on it in a lot of jurisdictions. You order from Carrie's downtown. You order from the trophy shop on Manchester Road that in your district. You go to Dan's Trophies in Poplar Bluff, you pay sales tax, and you sponsor a little league team. You pay your permits. You rent real estate space. But you order online, it's almost like you're incentivizing people to be from China and sell through a website. Your bill directs that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We have the wrong incentives. Basically, we give people a tax break to purchase from businesses outside the Missouri. And so that's the wrong incentive. We want Missouri businesses to grow. We need a level playing field in this situation. That being said, I also want tax cuts. So what I do is I put the tax cut on the end of Senate Bill 509, so that way if revenue comes in, then that tax cut will actually get a tax cut. If that revenue does not come in, there'll be no tax cut.
Talk about taxes. I think that people, it's my belief a lot of these things are connected. The piece of public, like from rape kits to domestic violence, those things have some natural allies, some natural ties. One thing I think is tied to the economy, and I've always said this, it's not something we like to admit down the boot heel, but the fact is your district probably produces more sales tax than any other district in the state of Missouri.
Yeah.
What matters, it matters that the roads you drive in Kennett are directly tied to Kerrs Mill Road in St. Louis County. And St. Louis County's economy is very tied to St. Louis City. And the biggest issue I think anybody would say was facing St. Louis City, therefore even directly tied to people in Kennett, is crime. The murder rate in St. Louis is very high. There's been a lot of acrimony between the police and the prosecutor, and frankly, there's a lot of murder cases that maybe have people that are charged that aren't getting prosecuted. It is something that I think people take for granted. I think it's easy to see how the murder rate in St. Louis City affects your district, but frankly, it affects Senator Cunningham's district too. Talk about something you're working on to address that.
Sure. So I don't want to necessarily get in the middle between the prosecuting attorney and the police. But one thing I do know is we have murders on the rise, and people need to feel safe when they go down to the downtown city. St. Louis is a hub for the entire state economically, and so people need to feel safe when they go downtown. And so what my bill does is allows our attorney general to prosecute murders in the city of St. Louis. The second thing it does, another problem we have in the city of St. Louis is carjacking. Right now there is no crime for carjacking. So if you have a failed attempt in a carjacking, certainly if you actually do carjack, it's robbery. Mm-hmm. But if you have a failed attempt, it's hard to prosecute for that as an actual crime. So by defining what carjacking is, then it'll make it easier for prosecutors to prosecute carjacking. And then when it comes to murders, I think we need all hands on deck to make sure we get these murderers off the street.
When I was a kid, I've always had a fond place in my heart for St. Louis because I'd listen to the radio, I'd listen to KMOX live at Shannon's after the ball game. My Aunt Mavis and Uncle Dave would take me to St. Louis to a ball game, and it was the highlight of my summer. And but they did that because they felt safe. If they didn't feel safe, we wouldn't have made that drive from Poplar Bluff to St. Louis and ate in a restaurant and got gas and bought me a foam finger or whatever. I do think that safety matters, and the effects on it aren't just St. Louis. It affects everyone.
Right. Yeah, I've certainly had numerous people in my district say, well, I don't know if I want to go downtown to a baseball game because they're worried about their carjacking or they're worried about murders. And so we need to create a situation, we need to get the crime rate down, and the best way to do that is to get violent murderers off the streets.
Let's talk about your campaign. It's primary season. People are excited about the primaries. But come the fall, I think all eyes will come to your district. You're running as Representative Deb Lavender. She's been on the show before. She's pretty unabashed that she believes in a different approach to government. She's more liberal than you are. This is a real contrast for St. Louis County, the last Republican state senator from St. Louis County. Tell me how the race shapes up from your perspective.
So my opponent is a tax and spend liberal. I'm a conservative, and I believe my district fits the mold of being a conservative. They don't like high taxes, and I'm a hard worker. We'll have a strong ground game, and we're going to win this race.
It's interesting. I'm not sure that anybody in any campaign will outwork either one of you two. Both of you two
That's right,
are
yeah.
known for hard work in campaigns.
Yep. Both of us are definitely very hard workers,
Yeah.
and so it'll be a fun race.
You see the trajectory of St. Louis County. Trish Gumby won a special election. You see some of the numbers for different races are changing a little bit. Your district probably went from a safe one to more of a swing district. Do you approach this campaign any different than any of the other ones you've won?
Not really. I mean, we're going to get out there and work hard and talk to voters, and I'm going to continue to do my job.
Well, Senator, I hope as the campaign unfolds, you'll come back here and talk around this week in Missouri politics.
Certainly.
We'll be right back with our Opinion Maker panel. Representative Mary Elizabeth Coleman joins us for an interesting discussion about coronavirus, PDMP, and several other things after this.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association.
Mike Parson served in law enforcement for 22 years. A former sheriff, Parson is tough on crime. Governor Parson is standing up for victims, investing in better mental health services, and cracking down on violent crime and drugs. Governor Parson's anti-crime initiatives have led to the arrests of hundreds of violent criminals and gang members. A former sheriff, a conservative, tough on crime governor. Mike Parson is making Missouri families safer.
Your energy needs are changing. That's why at Ameren, Missouri, we're not waiting on the future. We're building it with the Smart Energy Plan, advancing thousands of projects across the state, helping reduce emissions through cleaner energy sources, boost reliability with self-healing equipment, and better withstand storms with new composite poles. Moving Missouri forward and bringing us all a little closer together. That's energy at work. Ameren, Missouri.
Welcome back to our Opinion Maker panel. Ryan Hawkins, Democrat operative. Welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Donna Baringer, happy St. Patrick's Day week.
Oh, thank you.
But no parade.
I know.
I would have chanced it.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I'm the reason there's epidemics, though.
I still think I'll be visiting an Irish pub this weekend.
In Dogtown?
Probably.
There we go. Mary Elizabeth Coleman, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much for having me.
Interesting, kind of a sobering week in the Capitol.
Yeah, absolutely.
As the week went on, I think all of society looked at the coronavirus a little differently. As the week progressed, the state Senate Wednesday night kind of went into a pretty quick caucus and came out with they were going to take off this coming week. The House is going to go into technical sessions this week, but still work on the budget. Give folks, first of all, from the legislative perspective, what is the breakdown of what you're going to try to accomplish and how this is going to alter your schedule?
Well, it's already altering our schedule. The Senate isn't coming in next week. What we're doing in the House is we're starting technical sessions at 2 o'clock on Sunday, so just right after the show. And then technical on Monday and Tuesday. It's really important. We have a constitutional mandate to get the budget done, and so we're just shifting into budget mode. We're going to be hearing that on Wednesday, perfecting those bills, and then on Thursday, third reading them. And we'll see whether we get much else done. We'll reevaluate after our previously scheduled spring break.
And you go on spring break.
That's right.
Starting that Thursday.
That's right.
You know, if you're a John Rizzo in the Senate, you had to say, well, you mean take off a week so we don't have to filibuster all night? Well, okay. But there are serious implications as to how legislation moves. The House could pass things pretty quickly because of the rules and procedures, but there's a lot of bills that maybe you don't want to see passed that will be in the state Senate now, and you have to take those hours get pretty precious as closer it gets to the end of session.
That is correct. A lot of people don't realize that the budget doesn't have to be passed until May 8th. So I know that we're in a hurry to push it through, and that's why we're having this special session, and the House is staying in session. But I also want to make sure that that's our main focus is the budget. Because I know because of the virus, there are certain things we're trying to put in the budget that might help us in the long run. In other words, the budget isn't until the next year, but we will be financially impacted today, and we're going to have to figure out how to pay for it tomorrow.
This is one part where the House probably is going to look good. They couldn't come to a consensus revenue estimate, and the House was very, probably, if anything, they were on the low ball end of it.
Very conservative, and that's looking like it was the right play at this point, where we have some some expenses we don't know about. One of the things that I heard that I thought was incredibly smart was, with this coronavirus, we're not preparing for a blizzard, we're preparing for winter, and that's going to be a longer term impact, and so we need to make strong decisions now that's going to be able to make sure that we're having less impact as we go forward. So the more prepared we are now, the less it'll be a disruption in the long run.
With baseball not starting, I think Punxsutawney Phil's reputation is completely ruined. Seriously though, there was a cultural thing where you heard about this virus, and I'm a simple West Butler County hillbilly. We normally think of things that happen in China as really not mattering, or maybe in the cities. However, I think really Wednesday night, the state Senate comes out early in the evening, so we're going to cancel for next week. They didn't announce it, but that was the decision they made. And then Wednesday night, Tom Hanks, his wife, and NHL and NBA, you could just see Wednesday night. It's when this hit the country.
Yes. Yeah, I was watching. I was actually sitting at my daughter's goalie practice, watching ESPN on my phone, watching the Thunder and the Jazz. They were like, "What happened here? We're about ready to tip off. Now we've got to run back." And you're sitting there thinking, "All right, this isn't good." And I think that what you're seeing is a fine line between being cautious and being prepared and hysteria. And I think that for all of us going through this, because this is something that we've never had to do before, and it's a political show, and this is a little bit deep for me, but I think we have to stay on the line of be cautious, be prepared, and tone down the rhetoric on the crazy side.
So there is, people forget, but in fourth grade, I think I was too old, or maybe Neelyville didn't do this, but you learn Missouri history, and a lot of groups come to the Capitol. These are the school children flood the elevators and the rotunda, and they add a different energy to the place.
They do.
But this probably isn't the time you'd want your child up touring the state capitol.
Well, correct, because I call it a petri dish, literally, the Capitol, because every little germ that could be in there is in there. And unfortunately, that could impact us as legislatures, and if we all get sick, then we actually can't come back and do our job. So we need to be able to stay healthy long enough to get this budget passed.
Well, it's like you talk to people. It's what you do. You're a politician. You're in office. You're meeting with all these people in your districts. So is Dirk Deaton from McDonald County. So you literally take an ambassador from every county who's out in that county, and you bring them to Jeff City all together. It is a petri dish effect.
It is. Just to jump in on what Ryan was saying, it's that last year, every Thursday through Sunday, wrapping up my first year, I was sick in bed. I mean, it is, I just would come home and I had got whatever was in the Capitol that week. And so I had already started pushing the elevator button with my elbow, washing my hands a lot more, and I haven't gotten sick yet this year. And so it was good training to practice, stop touching your face, be careful. We have the tools in place to be able to address this. We just have to be smart, and we need to make sure that we're, again, thinking about other people, and that the little sacrifices that we make now are really for those at-risk populations. Most of us are going to be just fine, even if we catch it.
And I'm fine. I'm fine not being in a crowd or touching people. That's personally, right? I mean, this is
an introvert's dream.
I'm an introvert's dream, right? This is fantastic for me.
This is awful news for Joe Biden. Bad news for him.
No, I think that to kind of bring it back real quick on the politics side of it. We look on the federal response, and you look at the White House Oval Office speech the other night.
It hasn't been good.
It hasn't been good. I mean, this is the emperor has no clothes moment for Donald Trump. It is we can't go to his usual bag of tricks when his back is up against the wall. He can't tweet it away. He can't attack Hillary for it.
Politics on a second, but I do want to jump, though, while we're talking about the issues of essentially healthcare, prescription drug monitoring, something you've dealt with your whole time you've been in office, and even when you were an older woman. This has been a personal. Holly Rader has been on this show many times talking about it. It's personal to her. Probably it's what I have a regard for in it, because this isn't good politics for her probably, but personally she believes in this and has worked on it, and I believe just carried this to the end. And Tony Luetkemeyer in the Senate was an ally of hers, and they've finally got this bill to the Senate. Now that it comes to the House, is this the last session we're going to talk about PDMP?
Oh, My goodness, I hope so.
Yeah.
And the main reason I say it that way is because we passed it over 6 years ago in St. Louis County and St. Louis City. And the most important part about this PDMP that's being passed is the fact that it's going to work on what we've already done, and it's been successful already. There's only a few areas in the entire state that don't have their own PDMP. What this does is it puts us all on the same program, which is important because then you have your data and you can talk to each other. So we're ready to roll.
Is this going to get done?
I think so. I think big congratulations to Holly. You know, the St. Louis County model was based on her legislation when she first rolled it out. There have been improvements that have been made to it, and I think the conservative argument in support of PDMP is that this bill that Holly has brought forward has more consumer protections in place. So we're making sure that not only do doctors have the information they need to have another tool to fight the opioid epidemic, but you know, there's protections for consumers with purgings of the list, making sure that our data is safe, it's being monitored by a private company. And so it's better than the system that was the original version now that we have 6 years of data to try to improve it.
I'm not sure
I'm
in the
excited
Capitol
about
there's
that.
not a lot of folks that are just happy that this issue is behind them.
Yeah,
maybe.
absolutely.
This
Absolutely.
is a practical issue that if opioid abuse goes down next year, it'll credit to the folks that worked on this list.
Yeah, I think it's a great piece of legislation that's finally getting passed. I think that what I'm gonna kind of circle it all together here. We need to start looking forward as opposed to looking 30 minutes ahead from us, right? This is something that going forward is a model that we can look at and say, what's the next issue so we're not the last state in the country, that we're not 6 years behind. What do we need to be doing to help be prepared for the next, what is the next opioid epidemic? I can't say opioid sometimes.
It's really hard.
It's
I
really
agree.
hard, right?
Yeah.
But my point being is that I think that it comes down to it lets you look in a mirror and say, what are the priorities that we have for Missourians, and what can we do next? What's the next bill, the next PDMP? And I think that that's the next conversation that we need to be having.
Talk about the previous conversation for Democrats. I haven't seen a socialist taken down harder since like the Cold War. I mean, all the Democrats come together and just said, they looked over the edge of the cliff and said, we're not jumping. Joe Biden looks like he's well on the way to being the nominee. You almost have to feel sorry for someone like a Nicole Galloway if Bernie Sanders would have been the nominee. I don't know how you go to Crystal City and convince folks that socialism is going to work for them.
Right. Well, you can imagine that we are very happy in the Democratic Party for
Relief?
we're happy that Biden will be at the top, most likely at the top of the ticket, because that will help down ticket. And that's what's key for us, is that we have to be able to get more people in office, because otherwise we will always have the imbalance in Jefferson City.
You could take Joe Biden to the Crystal Tavern in Jeff City. You could take him to Kimswick and walk around on the street.
Sure.
And I think that any Democrat running would be fine to be seen with him.
Yeah.
Can you really imagine Bernie Sanders at the Elks Lodge in Festus?
Well, I have to tell you, there's a lot of Bernie bros in Jeffco, and I think that there's sort of a just blow the whole thing up mentality from a lot of people that were really getting behind Bernie in the same way that they lined up behind Trump. It's not a popular thing to say, but I think that there's some overlap between the Bernie bros and the Trump, and so I think
Brighton's grinders and the Bernie bros are the same.
I mean,
folks,
these guys, they're just mad and they're done and they want something different, and so I think that for the middle, for people who are wanting to seriously govern, and for the Democratic Party down ballot, I can't argue with that. Now, Ryan might have a different perspective. I don't know how happy he is.
I'm happy. I was the Bloomberg senior advisor, and we were telling everybody we got to Christmas Eve, we didn't get to do Christmas morning. I think that I got involved with the Bloomberg team, and Mike's message was, we'll get it done. Well, obviously we didn't get it done, but we're happy with that. The candidate most likely, and I think that Democrats.
It was going to come down to Sanders versus another option,
moderate,
and he was the bridesmaid to be of the next one, right? I mean,
listen, this is number one issue for Democrats coming out is we want to beat Donald Trump, and the ideological side of the Bernie Bros is just not going to happen. And so I'm happy with Joe Biden. I think that Joe Biden as a nominee can take the fight to Donald Trump. And like you said, he can go to a pub in Dogtown. He can go down to, Southeast Missouri. I think that it's one of those deals where you look at Joe Biden and, you may have issues with him, but at the end of the day, you're going to be like, yeah, he's not that bad. I'm okay with him.
You've got to be happy, though, if you're one of the people who makes memes, because it's going to be a fun October.
Oh. On all sides. It's gonna,
yeah.
if he sniffs one more baby, I think that I am going to just lose it.
You brought up a point, though. I think some of Donald Trump. Donald Trump has a connection with this state. Yeah. Donald Trump has a connection with union workers in South County and Eastern Jackson County, and his numbers of success when he ran proved that. However, I do think sometimes when you get in a situation like we're dealing with now with the coronavirus, some of that tweeting and things, they don't set as well when you're in an emergency as when the stock market's rolling and there's really not a foreign problem. I think sometimes the situation we're in right now, I think those things, people have less time for that.
I've said it before that I think that people who are solid Donald Trump people are always going to be solid Donald Trump people. They are never going to ignore, any of his faults. But the people that we talk about in the middle that kind of decide elections, whether they are suburban moms, whether they are union workers, whether they are, a senior citizen that is, in their second stage of retirement, done with the chaos, right? You can't just tweet at everything.
You think that a serious national situation makes the tolerance for that less?
Much less. Much less. You want stability. Markets want stability. Voters want stability, and they don't see it.
I think you were looking at, so Trump won by 19 last time. You were looking at upwards of 30 if it was Sanders. Joe Biden's a single-digit race, high single digits, but single-digit race in Missouri.
So one of the things that I said last year when I was running was people wanted to make predictions a long ways away from the election. And I think that talking about what's happening in March in 2020 is maybe not going to translate to what happens in November of 2020. People's memories are short, and a lot of time is going to happen between now and then. And I think that whether the policies of what we're enacting about making sure that people from the EU can't come, trying to have a rapid response from the CDC, we're going to see whether what this winter looks like.
6 months ago, coronavirus was like a Cancun hangover or something.
Nobody had any idea. We hadn't even heard of it. And so, again, we've got a lot of time between now and November. We're going to see what happens.
Ryan, with a minute left, who won the week?
Mike Bloomberg. I'm still Team Bloomberg. He's going to keep going. The campaign has public news reports switched to a super PAC, focusing on at least the battleground states, but expanding from there. We're still going to have staff. We're still going to do this. It's a great deal for him.
Who won the week?
Joe Biden.
I think that's probably true. Who won the week?
I think Holly Rader did. She's 8 years in on her signature policy issues. She's proven to her people she's a fighter, and I think I'd be watching that Senate seat pretty close.
It'd be interesting. I think Tony Luetkemeyer. I mean, a lot. This has been passed in the House several times. In the Senate, a real version of it that could be taken wasn't. Tony Luetkemeyer, he really. I think it was an interesting. If you want to watch how to pass things in the Senate, he really paid attention to the opposition. He worked with them. He credited them on the floor, and I think it paid off at the end of the day.
And he worked closely with the handler and made sure he didn't take over her bill, so that when she got it back, it was something she wanted to pass.
Terrific. Hope you'll join us next week from Kansas City on This Week in Missouri Politics.
This Week in Missouri Politics, sponsored by the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, SPIRE, and Sterling Bank.
We're doing a thing of the history of Missouri. We're going to do it one county at a time. We call it Show Me Missouri. We're going to travel to all 114 counties of the state. We'll have a member of the Farm Bureau, county elected officials, some of your state legislators you see here on the show. We're going to talk about the history, what's happening now in the county, and how the two are interconnected. It's a passion project of mine. If you like history, I hope you'll get involved. Follow us. Go to MissouriTimes.com. You can see it. We'll probably branch it off into its own social media at some point. But you've been so good to us at the Missouri Times, the show, different papers. This is a passion project that I hope you'll enjoy. It's called Show Me Missouri, the history of Missouri, one county at a time. The first county was Polk County. We had a great time. And we hope you'll go to MissouriTimes.com, find a little bit about it. And if you like the history of the state, I hope you'll enjoy it.